Okay. All right. We're back. This is episode 7 of the HQ podcast. I've got a guest next to me that I've been really keen to get on pretty much ever since that I've built this space. He goes by the name of Gerry Young. He is the owner of Hobart Martial Arts Academy down here in Hobart. Yeah, how are you, man? It's good to have you on. Pleasure.
Yeah, I'm pumped, man. I'm really excited to be here. I love this. I love this energy. I love the feel. It's really cool.
I think even when I was coming to the gym, early days of building this space, you were the one of the people that was really like kind of backing me to pursue something outside of the ordinary. So like I felt like it was only right to get you on, especially with what you've done and also with my own interests in martial arts and what it's done for me as well as a person. It just seemed fitting to really have you on.
Oh, yeah, that's really like important to me, because I think that it's easy to just live the ordinary life, and there's nothing wrong with the ordinary life. It's great, but most people I think have this twinkle of a possibility to try something different, and not everyone does. And honestly, like, it doesn't even matter whether like how you define the success of what you do. It just matters that you do it. And like even if what you're into I wasn't even into, it wouldn't matter, because the point is that you're into it and you're having a go.
Yeah.
Like, that's what I really respect.
Yeah.
Totally and I respect that.
I feel you do see that to some degree down here in Tasmania at times, where people can be quite scared to jump out of their shell and try something new. But that's the beauty, and that's why I wanted to do this, and then also give other people an opportunity to come on to tell their story.
Yeah, totally.
And all those different things. And I think your story is very interesting, and I only know a fraction of it. But I guess if we go back to the start of, I wanted to know more about who you are as a person and how that kind of got you into the martial arts and the things that you do now. What was the first sparks to that journey?
It's an interesting question in a way, because it's the sort of question that I've asked myself heaps of times, because I think the answer to those sort of like answers to questions about the past, they get deeper as you mature. So, if I want to be like all chronological on that, like the first martial arts I trained was in 1989. I was like 7. It was a long time ago, and I was a kid and I was training, but you ask my folks and they're like, I was pestering them for years wanting to train. So like I obviously already wanted it, and, it's a hard one to tell. At that age, most likely, it's probably, I watched The Karate Kid or something like when I was a little kid, and it was purely like a cool thing to do. And I was like, let's do that. It's awesome. And, the mystical side of it, like the older Asian teacher that has that stoic advice that, changes your life and all that sort of, every movie's got that in it, right? And I think that's appealing. But would that keep me in it? Probably not. Like, I think as you get older, you see through that a little bit. But I think that it's probably as well, like, there's probably a lot of stuff around, like, fighting, a lot of stuff around, there's certainly a reasonably rough kind of upbringing I had. I was in Claremont, and it was, there was certainly plenty of fights, and I think that there was at the time I wouldn't have really labelled it, but now when I look back, I kind of think, maybe there's actually like a little bit of like, sort of, I don't know if trauma's the right word, but there's a little bit of that kind of panic built into that. Like my wife always says to me, like, why do you always like sit facing the door? And what, it's just, it's hypervigilance.
Yeah, okay.
And I think that underlying thing has kept me in martial arts all the time, because, I've been training in all these different martial arts at different, through my entire life, because I think on some level I felt I needed to. I mean, of course, the reality is I probably don't, and but I felt like I did, and it's it's like a long, constant sort of sense of need. And one thing that life experience taught me is that really you probably don't need to. You probably don't need to have this need for self-defense or anything.
Do you think that people do need, I guess, some level of it or level of confidence that if they were to get themselves in a situation where it was they had to protect like the people that they love and that, I guess then that's when it would be really important to have more so the confidence aspect to it.
Definitely that. But I mean, there's a lot to that. There's a lot of angles to look at for that. Like, so let's be honest, like even the roughest parts of Hobart is still pretty safe. You know, like I'm pretty confident I can go pretty much anywhere in Hobart. And it's not that I'm, you know, tough enough to handle myself. It's just that I could just talk to people.
Yeah, of course.
It'd be fine. Like, but, you know, like I lived in Thailand for 6 months when I was 18 and there's places there where maybe not, you know, like, you know, what if you're living in India? Yeah, there's places where you do have to, like, we would have to be able to protect yourself. At the same token, there's plenty of places where jiu-jitsu is not going to get it done as well. Like, so it's all that sort of thing. But, you know, one of the biggest things about, like, being able to defend yourself, right? It's what are we really talking about? Like, I'm a man living in Hobart. The single biggest thing I can do to be safe is avoid public drinking places. You know, you take public intoxication out of it. Like, I haven't had a fight in my lounge room ever. You know what I mean? Like, on the other hand, now there's a very different discussion for women. Women have a different set of threats, which is a tragedy. They shouldn't, but they do. You know, whether that be threats, you know, in public places, like especially around alcohol, or whether it be from a domestic partner. Like those things are totally different discussion. But there's another aspect, like the confidence part, that's relevant still. You know, I was in a dog park with my wife and the two pups recently, and there's a guy there and he's like, dog's off the lead and his dog's fully aggressive and the dog's totally mirroring him. Like he's the guy, you know. The guy's like blaming everyone else for his dog being aggressive but not looking at himself. And like there was no physical, you know, fighting with this guy, but I did, you know, use the right tone of voice, the right words and the right physical posturing to let him know that there was no escalation gonna happen. Like it just wasn't gonna happen. And probably, you know, with less confidence years ago, that would have been too much. Like probably would have boiled over into something physical, whereas I didn't let that happen this time. So that part of self-defense, that's huge.
What's that confidence? And also just what you've explained, then you have control over a situation without maybe an individual even somewhat realising.
Totally.
Because you're not actually putting control on them in like a way that's threatening at all.
No,
it actually is kind of in a safety way where you're so confident in yourself and your own abilities to regulate someone in that dysregulation to then, 100%. So I think that in itself is, I guess, maybe the art side to...
Well, yeah, and I mean, think about it, like, you know, I think there's probably been somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 people come through my school, you know, since it's been open. That, if nothing else, that's a huge amount of practice just dealing with people and dealing with people who might be stressed, they might be a bit, you know, like a bit of anxiety or whatever else. Like, that's all skill, you know. And, I mean, working on pub doors, the same thing, all that. But then again, I'm also, like, in my other work in physical therapy, I'm dealing with, like, another side of that. And I think every interaction we have with a person is practice. It's practice on how to act, you know. Same as kids. Like, how do we, you know, working with kids who might have come up in a rough environment or something like that. Like, I deal with those kids a little differently to someone who come up in a really nurtured environment. You know, and you kind of, with practice and with, as long as you're prepared to take on what you see, like learn what you see, then you're okay. You know? Yeah.
So you said you started in what was it, when you were 7 years old?
Yeah, 89.
So 1989. And then...
So I turned 8 that year,
And that was in Tasmania?
That was actually in Western Australia.
Okay, right.
We lived so my family lived for a year in like way in the middle of the desert in Western Australia. Like my parents decided that they wanted to have a bit of a shift in their life for a little while, and they figured that rightly, the more experiences they can give to the kids that are out of the ordinary, the more we'll grow. And so I actually don't know the full story, but the opportunity for them to go live in an Aboriginal community came up. And so that was the Yamaji people.
Yeah, wow.
Which is like 3 or 4 hours drive north and east inland from Geraldton.
Yeah.
So it's way out there, real scrubby desert. And, on one hand, all I did was go to school, like in a boarding school. That's all I did. On the other hand, like I was the only kind of only white fella there, and me and my 2 brothers and my younger sister. And, that community, there was a lot of different people who were working and helping out there. And it just happens that one of the people that was helping out there was a taekwondo teacher.
Right.
And a lot of cool stuff about that for me too. Firstly, I got started with this taekwondo teacher, and it wouldn't have mattered if it was what I was learning at that age. It's all cool stuff, kick, punch, all that. It's all just exciting stuff. But one thing, my teacher was a woman, and that's important because, I saw her move. I saw what she could do, and she was hard. She was tough, and I was like, nice to see for a young man. It's nice to have a formational experience where a woman is the leader.
Yeah,
because you can learn a lot from that.
How do you think that impacted you compared to if it was a man? What do you think?
I think if a man did something physical and strong, it's like, well, my family are all pretty big. We're pretty strong people, and we're all like from trades and stuff like that. We're all, like physical strength is something that I'm accustomed to in men. So it probably wouldn't have impressed me that much.
Okay, yeah.
But like Dad told me this story because my dad's obviously like, I don't know exactly how you call it, but he's probably crossing the line a bit. But he'd watched like one of the classes that she taught us and some self-defense technique. It was like, how do you escape when someone grabs your hair? And so 3 days later, he walked in to the room that she was in and grabbed her by the hair, which is probably not really okay.
Yeah, yeah.
It was the 80s, so... Anyway, she did the technique on him.
Right.
And Dad said it not only did it work, but it hurt. He said it really hurt his hand. It really... because she, put her full energy into what she did. She grabbed his wrist and bent it. And he was like... And young men, like my dad's the strongest guy there is. No one's stronger than my dad.
Of course,
in my 7-year-old mind.
Yeah.
It's like this girl who's way smaller than him did this to him. I'm like, wow, that's magic. That must, that's so legit. And that's pretty, because I got to see her do it, but I also got to hear the person who was my pole star for what strength is, that person said, wow, that really worked.
Yeah.
That was probably...
So you had that belief, I guess, as well. Yeah.
So that's huge. Like that. And that's one of those things that, because the problem with martial arts is there's a lot of nonsense in it, let's be honest, but there's also a lot of belief in it. Like, I don't know how many techniques I've been taught, but lots, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands. How many have I actually personally made work for real?
Yeah.
4,
yeah,
5, not that many. So there's a certain degree of belief, to start with, until you start to get your own experience.
Especially at that young as well.
Yeah,
that's
totally.
where it's like it's fun and exciting, but you have to, I guess that would what then maybe had somewhat of an impact in sparking that flame within you to really believe in this as like your calling to a degree.
That's it. And it's an interesting one. I mean, they say if you do what you love, you never work a day in your life. Yeah. So by that rationale, maybe I've got the perfect life. But that depends. Do I like doing admin and mopping floors? And, because that's what the job really is, right? It's like, how good are you at doing BAS statements? That's what it's all about. But the martial arts part is there, and the real enjoyment I get to have is that deep dive into that. Not to mention though, I've been doing this a long time now.
Yeah. And
I was teaching a person the other day in a one-on-one session, and I wasn't teaching something that I probably normally would. It was just a certain technique we needed to cover. And I did it, and the person's pretty strong, and I did the movement and it worked properly the way it's supposed to. And I sort of just realized to myself that I just did it right and it worked. There was no forcing it, no faking it or anything else. And I'm definitely not perfect at this. I'm not the best in the world, but you know, you do something for 30 odd years and it does start to sink in.
Yeah.
You know, which is pretty cool.
So you were living out in the community, then got introduced to the Taekwondo teacher. And then when was it that you came to Tasmania? Because I know that we've talked in the gym about how Jiu-Jitsu especially it's a relatively kind of new form of martial art in Tasmania. It was only, when was it you sent me the list of all the people with black belts and what was the first year?
It was only, so I was only in WA for a year, then we came back here.
Right. Yeah.
So it was like a sabbatical or whatever you call it, you know, that time. But we came back here when I was a little kid and we went. I started training Jiu-Jitsu here in 2001, but Jiu-Jitsu started here in 1997.
Yeah.
And when you think about that, right, no one in the world outside of Brazil had heard of Jiu-Jitsu until kind of the 80s. Then it starts to trickle into, you know, wherever the surf was. Like, you know, like California, Hawaii, even some parts of Australia a little bit, but there was never a presence here. Just as some guy from Brazil came here. And
then started
you start
teaching.
hearing things, but it doesn't happen.
Right.
But then, like, he's never, like, stationed here. And then, you know, the first Australians start going off to, you know, LA originally and then to Brazil and they're training. And, you know, John Will's the first one. He's, like, there's no denying John's the pioneer. He's the guy that brought it here. He's the first black belt, you know.
Yeah.
But he's the dude that was, like, you know, he's pioneering it, but he's the guy who's on the road every weekend. He's like Queensland, New South Wales, WA, everywhere around the place, and Tassie. And he's the guy that spread it. And so he comes in August 97 and he taught a seminar and, you know, and it was different to what we would see as jiu-jitsu now because it was, you know, striking, kicking, takedowns.
Okay.
Like it wasn't that he was that the kicks and the strikes were jiu-jitsu. It's just that, you know, you and me don't know what this is, so we don't understand. So he's like, this is how you punch, this is how you kick, this is how you take a guy down who's trying to kick you. Yeah. This is how you pin him, this is how you choke him.
Yeah, okay.
You know, that sort of stuff, or very real world sort of stuff, you know. And that was his whole thing. And like, so I wasn't there, but my coach Adam was there, and he's the first black belt in Tassie. And so that's 97. And, you know, gradually builds up, and he gets his black belt in 2009. But 97, right, the whole world found out about jiu-jitsu in the UFC, right, UFC 1. Yeah. They found out about it in 1993. That's when that all kicks off, right? And, like, a lot of people knew what jiu-jitsu was before that, but not globally. Yeah. But that happened, and everyone's like, oh, my God, you know, I've got to do this, got to learn. And so jiu-jitsu is already happening in Australia by then, but it's 4 years later before it's, you know, in Tasmania. Yeah. And the thing with it that I find is kind of interesting is in America they had like pay-per-view on their like cable TV access, I guess, you know. Like I was trying to explain to my kids what cable TV is the other day, and they're like, is that like a streaming service? I'm like, I guess it sort of is, but it's like a physical cable and a weird box thing. And but yes, it is. But they had that. We didn't have that here. But, I mean, for me, finding out about jiu-jitsu was the same thing, though. I watched UFC 1. Yeah. But I watched it on video. My housemate had this friend who was like a super martial arts nerd and really cool guy. And he came around with these VHSs and said, you got to watch this. And so I watched it, and I'm like, oh, my God, this guy's, like, awesome. You know, it's totally cool. So, you know, I, like, got yellow pages and was ringing around to find it because I still... Yeah, the internet existed, but it wasn't good enough to. You're not going to go on there and find a streaming video and learn from it. It just like I didn't really know what to expect, and but Adam was kicking around, and I found him, and I went and joined his classes, and you know, kind of off we went. But he was a blue belt then, and it's like white belt, blue belt, purple belt, brown belt, black belt. He didn't get his black belt until 2009, so we'd known each other for. 8 years by then, and you know, and by then there's multiple schools in Tassie, but the cool thing is it's like this. They're every other martial art I've ever done before that, I'm training with like 3 and 4 stripe black belts and stuff because they're really established. But jiu-jitsu is so new that like these colored belts are the teachers.
Yeah.
And that's a weird thing too, because like at HMAA at our school, we've got 8 black belts there, and they're all legit. They've all had their experiences. They've all earned it the hard way. And like, I don't know, there's many. There's definitely schools in Tassie with lots of black belts, but I don't think there's any with that many. I don't think. But like, what's funny about it is because there's so many people with black belts now. Like, you walk in off the street and you're someone new, and you go, "Oh, the teacher tonight's a blue belt," and you think, "Oh, the other one's got a black belt down the road." Whereas, and that's fair enough, but to me, it's like, I still remember the old days. You're not even going to get your blue belt in the old days unless you're ready to like open a school, or not necessarily open a school, but you've got to represent, And so I respect any blue belt teaching a class, even though we've made this trip up to black belts now.
Yeah,
and I think my category is black belts that are awarded in the state. I believe we're up to 51 now.
Right.
Maybe 50. I have to check my list.
It's amazing, and that's when you told me I was amazed at how like kind of new it is to Tasmania. Like, it's still like, in a sense, like it's still in that early stages to a degree where it's, and you would have been able to see it grow and kind of into what it is now. And that's, I think the next thing I wanted to ask you is what your thoughts are on, after seeing it grow, the current state of where it is at now. What are things that you've seen that you remember as, I don't know, quite exciting throughout the times, or things that you're looking forward to?
Sure. So it's definitely changing, right? But like, it's going to. I don't care what community you want to point at, martial arts or music or anything. Nothing stays the same, and you'll get a movement, and that movement will exist for a period of time, and it'll produce 3 or 4 like leaders or pioneers, and they will go off with their interpretation of that movement. And suddenly you've got 4 distinct movements, and then and so on it goes. Like the Kyokushin karate, the full contact karate style, which is really awesome. Their founder died in the 90s, and 5 minutes later, there's like 4 or 5 distinct associations who don't mix. Yeah, like they all mixed before, but now they don't anymore. And that's not. I'm not being critical of that. That's what happens. Like the jiu-jitsu that we all learnt when I started was very much, 1, how do you win the UFC in the early days, and 2, how do you kind of win fights? That's what it was for, Even like the sport competitive side of jiu-jitsu, that sort of hadn't really gained prominence. We had competitions, but it hadn't gained prominence for those first few years. Now it's much more prominent, which is good. But then it's, there's people like me who are kind of like, I like to have an all-rounder perspective. I want it to have an MMA application, a self-defense application, a gi, a no gi, you name it. I want it all. Yeah. Then there's like some schools are only sport of this rule type, and then there's other ones over here that are only sport of that rule type, and they're like critical of each other in some ways, or they don't mix, or there's already this big like divergence. Yeah. And I don't care, like, it's fine. Like, if you've got a passion for this and I've got a passion for that, as long as we're both doing our thing, then who cares, man? It's great. Like, but so as far as where does it go? Well, it'll diversify further. It'll keep going further. And some people will, enjoy it. Some people won't. It will be, whether it, like, everyone who does jiu-jitsu is like a good fighter anymore or not, may not be true, but it also doesn't matter. It's not, that's not the point, Like, it's never been about that. It's been about, did you come off the street and come in and find something that was good for your soul? Yeah, exactly. And if you did, or whoever else, whoever did, then that's its purpose. So, if a person comes to my gym for a trial, tries it out for a while, and then finds after a month that they'd actually had a better fit down the road at the other gym, good.
Yeah.
You know, that like I'd rather see someone training at another gym than not training.
Yeah.
For sure.
Of course.
You know, and that's my big thing. Like I think that we'll always be here and we'll always be doing our own thing, and you know, my school will be going along on the basis of the kind of people that are into that kind of community, and then you know, I'm sure the other ones will be kicking along doing what they're doing too. I mean, I don't know, but I'm assuming so.
Yeah.
You know?
I think that is the really cool thing about your gym as well, is that there is so much going on, and it is very diverse in the sense of it's not as if it's just always no-gi or always this or always that. And then you've got the lads in the corner that are doing their fight camp and the preparation for that. How do you, I guess you've got like a big group of other individuals and martial artists involved as well, but how do you kind of manage having so many of those different things going on?
Yeah.
Especially with the one thing that I would say is extremely taxing on the mental would be preparing the fighters at the gym for fight camp and then going into these fights up at Legion and all that. That is what I'm also so interested about with the martial arts, is that mental preparation and how you balance all these things as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. So the first thing, right, is my philosophy in the gym, and I don't know if I've always had this philosophy or if it's evolved, and I honestly don't know, but for me it's terrifically important not to be this cult of personality. It's not about me. I mean, it's a bit about me, but it's a bit about you. You know, it's about whoever. It's everyone has a story to tell. And if you like leave me alone in a room, I'm going to come up with what I think is best. And I'm a bit kind of OCD about it. And if I let myself, I'm going to say a bit, I'm a lot OCD about it. So if I let myself, I might be like really like hard on the other coaches and be like, no, you have to do it this way. You have to do it that way. And sometimes I do. I say, look, I really want it this way. But mostly I think, well, why do I even encourage that guy to teach at all if I'm going to be insisting on it being my way? Like everyone's got something they bring. I got people there who they might not even be that great at running a group, but gee, they can bring the best out of an individual. And there's other people who they don't teach anything particularly special technically, but they really bring out certain parts of the mentality that you need. And we're all different in that way. And when a coach comes along that is a fit for the gym, like that makes me so happy, because it's not like, you know, it's a threat to me. It's like, it's good. I mean, like, you know, I teach Jiu-Jitsu, I teach Muay Thai as well, right? I've never even fought in Muay Thai. I've done a lot of striking, but I've never fought in Muay Thai. But I'm a good coach and I understand the mechanics of this, so I can teach it.
Yeah.
I understand fighting and understand competition, so I can do that. But I've got two coaches I was always very lucky because I had Dave Layton coaching with me, and he's a really experienced coach. He's an awesome guy for a long time. But in the last 2 to 3 years, I've got two more come. There's Jay, who came Korea, Thailand here, and he's had like 60 fights across, you know, multiple countries, and he's really incredibly experienced, and he started his coaching journey with us. And then we've got Andy, who, you know, heaps of boxing, then heaps of Thai in the UK, already started his coaching journey a long time ago, and he's come to join us.
Yeah.
And I mean, look, if I was honest, like I could have been really intimidated by these guys. Like, I wouldn't say that they know everything that I don't. Like, there's definitely things that both of them have picked up from me. But, oh my God, I have learned so much from these guys. Like, they're so awesome. And the fact that I am prepared to do that is what allows the whole gym to operate the way it does. Because I can't do all those things you said. I can't run the beginners class and train the fighters and do the mental prep for the fighters and make sure they're doing their strength and conditioning and all that. I can't do all that because I'm only one person. But I can like trust that it will happen because it's a great community. And I might ask this person over here to do this and that person over there to do that, or I might, you know, just like make a few changes here and there. But ultimately, you know, the job of a team is done by a team, not by an individual. And
that trust in each other as well.
Yeah.
The trust to to bring that diversity, which is kind of what you just explained on then of the experiences that all the trainers have at your gym, is bringing their own experiences in and then throughout.
Yeah.
Which I think is, really cool.
So, I mean, you think about like what I was saying about that happiness to have other coaches doing things, right? Because it's like, there's always a danger that you let your own ego get in the way. And, I'm just as prone to that as the next guy. Like, I really try to be cool about that sort of stuff. But, like training someone how to throw a kick is not the same skill as training someone how to stand across the ring from somebody and deal with the confrontation and throw the kick.
How do you do that? How do you train for that?
That's hard.
Yeah.
Like, there is no college you can go to.
There's no uni degree for that one.
No. I mean, you can do qualifications and study in, like, say, sports coaching. And I recommend it. Like, because the mentalities in sports coaching are universal across all sports. But having said that, there's some things you learn from experience. And so, I mean, I have been around fight shows for a long time, and one thing that I've done to study, like I've cornered a lot of fighters, right? That's straight away, that's a lot of experience. But I watch other corners. I watch what they do. I reasonably brazen, but I go up to people who maybe I've just, my guy just fought their guy, and I say, I pick their brain. How do you do that? No, what's interesting? Like, can you show me how you did that? Or, how do you stop the cut? Like, what are you using for like your coagulant? And like, I ask those sort of questions, and over time I build up the knowledge. And I've done that all over Australia.
Yeah.
But the other thing, I've judged a lot of fights and I've reffed a lot of fights. So now I understand what the conditions that the fighter is fighting in.
Yeah.
So I get to observe what happens. I see their responses. When I go in the corner, like really early on, and like the person's doing one thing well or badly, and I'm really excited. I'm, oh my God, you got to do this, that, the other. Make sure you do this, that, the other. And then I realize that they didn't hear any of it. Like, okay, so maybe next time, like go in there and just say one thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, you got to be prepared to experiment too, though. Like, so at the moment, like it used to be sparring night. Everyone, like, guys come in, do rounds of sparring.
Yeah.
That's your training. But now it's like, okay, come in and I'm going to tell you who you're sparring.
Yeah.
For multiple rounds. And I'm going to watch. And I'm going to corner you. And at the end of the round, you're going to come and listen. And you're going to hear my voice.
Yeah.
And I'm going to practice saying things in a tone that you're going to hear on the night. Like, that takes my discipline. I've got to use the phrase. I've got to, like, stuff that'll cut through. Because, like, when you're on stage, right? This could be music. This could be theatre. Particularly music when there's a crowd, you can't hear a damn thing.
No, not at all.
So how do you hear when your bass player says something or whatever? It's because they say it in the way that cuts through. You pick up on that tone.
Yeah, it might not even be something they're saying. It could just be a gesture.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, those forms of communication are really 100%. Important. And that's what you're saying there, where the forms of communication you're using, which in my head it just like sparked. I was like, wow, that is so interesting that you'll even train for the cadence in how you'll speak.
Yeah.
And like that, because it puts the fighter into a world of familiarity, like, and what they're actually going to experience in that cage.
Yeah.
I had never even thought of that, to be honest. I never thought it would be like that deep.
I mean, I didn't think of it until I did.
Yeah.
But how many people are in a constant state of analysis? Like, my motto has always been that you can always improve. That's my motto, right? There's always room for improvement. And there's no point in having that as a motto and then not acting on it.
Of course.
And like, I know that, like, it's not like every fighter can hear me. Some fighters, it doesn't matter what you do, they can't hear you. That's just how they are. Some fighters hear everything you say. But I've had people come to me and say, can you come to Sydney and corner me in this fight? Because I've heard you cornering other people and I like how you do it. But they're not from my gym.
Yeah.
Like, they're not even in my team. But it's like, yeah, sure, that'd be a good holiday. Let's do it, And I've had that sort of stuff happen. And it's like, if you're doing something that's connecting with someone on a human level, it's probably right.
Yeah.
I think. I mean, that's the same as this. Like, we're having a conversation, we're connecting. It's real, and same thing if someone's come to me with like a back injury and I'm working with them or something, they're not just I'm not a robot, and they're not just some person. Like we're having
there's a form of connection there, of course. Yeah.
Like that's 9/10 of the job.
Yeah.
You know, like connecting with people. How do I connect with this little 4-year-old who's like never been apart from mum before, but mum knows that it's good because he's got out of school in a few months, bring him to the class. So, you know, that sort of stuff. Like, how do you do that? Well, you've got to find where that kid is and you got to meet him there.
Yeah.
You know, you can't drag him to you.
I guess I was going to ask how you connect with the fighters that have either just won the fight or they've just trained 4 months, whatever it is that the fight camp would be, and then they've lost.
Yeah.
And then that side to then still inputting the passion and whatnot, because it'd be quite a disheartening feeling. I've never gone through it, so that's why I'm really interested. I'm sure others are.
I mean, I'd be lying if I said that people doesn't affect people. It does.
Yeah.
And remember as well that you go in there and you win that fight, and maybe that win prevents you from hearing the stuff that you need to hear anyway. Because just because you won doesn't mean there's not plenty to learn. On the other hand, just because you lost doesn't mean you did everything right. You know, you can do everything right and still lose. Maybe it's just a iffy judge's decision, or maybe you did 80% of it right and 20% wrong. You know, it could be anything. But the problem is what we're talking about here is hard because I can only control my side of it. So there's a thing that I talk about where in jiu-jitsu particularly, where I want my students to really focus on like the process, like how they're trying to do it, not what they do.
Yeah.
Like, I armbarred that guy, I choked that guy, like, you know, how good am I? And it's like, yeah, but it was reckless, it was crazy, it took all the strength you had, and it worked because they were smaller than you. Like, I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in, did you do it in a way that's repeatable and good, right? So with that same mentality, I'm going to try to talk to these fighters, win or lose, in a way that I believe is what is good for them to hear, partly what they need to hear, but also what's going to try to comfort them in the right ways.
Yeah.
And I can't control how they'll take it. Like, I can't. There's nothing I can do about that. That's them. And I do my best, but I can't necessarily. But I still have to try to do it right. Because, okay, so you train real hard, you lose. So my focus now, I've got to help you not to feel really defeated. You got to like not feel like negative in a way that you can't come back from.
Yeah.
I've got to get you back in the gym pronto. I've got to get you to see rationally what happened, what was good and what wasn't, and translate it. But you go in there and you win, I've got to get you not to slack off.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
come in and look at it and we go through, because, you know, like even in like UFC championship fights, there's people who win those fights who have heaps they could have improved on. And if their coach is worth having, you bet your bottom dollar that coach is in there a week later in the gym, give them their week off, and then they're back in there and they're saying, hey, good, but you lost like a lot there. That guy nailed you there, or this happened there. And it doesn't mean to say like, you know, you never get hit or something. Like, of course you will. But did it happen because of something out of your control or within your control? Ultimately, though, it's a damn sight easier to do all of this stuff I'm talking about if that's the underlying culture. If that's what people are expecting.
Yeah.
Expecting you're going to hear that.
And you set that up well prior to that fight then. Yeah.
Absolutely. Like,
well prior. In the gym and with the vibes that are going and the community that's formed around that should then assist with that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that you, like, it's like when you, those people who've got kids, right? Like, my kids are, you know, in high school and college, right?
Yeah.
And one thing with the kids is you don't, like, in my opinion and my experience, you don't have no interaction on a behavior at all until it happens and then respond to it.
Yeah.
Like, oh, you know, my kid did whatever wrong and I punished them in some way, or I deprived them of something, take their phone, or I give them, ground them or whatever. It's like, great, that's fine, but what about the 15 years of conversation leading up to that?
Yeah.
You know, has it been happening? Are they prepared to engage with you and listen with you? Like, it doesn't mean to say that they won't, act up. I sure as hell did. And, my kids do too, just quietly sometimes. But, like, at least we can have a conversation afterwards in a civil way, I think that almost like what you say after the crime or what you say after the fighter loses or whatever isn't probably anywhere near as important as what you've said, in the lead up.
Definitely.
And just one thing, though, that is important for the coach to say that they don't always, and I try to, is I was wrong. Actually, I was wrong there.
Yeah. And that's taken a step back from your own ego as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, every one of my fighters who watches this is going to say, oh, what a wanker. He never said that, But some of them will say, no, that's right. He did actually do that.
Yeah.
But where it's hardest is if I say, something, I was wrong, but so were you.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't have to be like, just because I'm wrong doesn't mean you're right.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's like, I mean, look, the kids, right? Like my son, like the other day, he was having it wasn't a moment. We had a bit of a moment, let's put it that way. And I did what I don't like to do. Like I lost my temper and I raised my voice and then straight away I'm like, oh, idiot. Like that's not leadership, right? That's not great parenting. Good one. And then so we calmed down a bit. We're driving and I calmed down a bit and I said, look, I'm sorry. Like, I'm sorry I did that. It wasn't the right response. I shouldn't have done that. And I shouldn't have done the 5 sentences before that got us there. So I'm sorry. And then I said, I also want you to think about what happened though. Because I didn't do it out of nowhere. Like I was responding. I was responding to the stuff you were doing. So can we have a moment where we talk about what you were doing as well? And it doesn't mean it's your fault that I reacted.
Yeah.
Because it's not. Like it's my fault. But I did react to something.
Yeah.
And I think that attempt at humility as a coach, as a father, as a whatever, that's super important.
Yeah. And I like what you said before about just because someone is wrong does not mean that the other or anything else is right. Sometimes we do think that. I do. And off that thought I had on the wrong or right, what's like a common mistake that you see in with the fighters in their fight camp during the fight? Obviously there's so many mistakes that you can make, but what's something that you see that maybe that a fighter is listening to this now could go, oh, that's a very common thing? Like,
one thing is that when your coach tells you something, right, they're telling it to you because they feel that it's the best thing. Okay, so let's say you're training and you're fighting away. You've got 2 voices that you're hearing, right? One voice is external, that's your coach. It's probably your mates and it's probably YouTube and everything else, but it's those external voices. They're saying to you, stand in this way, put your feet there, make sure you pivot, all those sort of technical things.
Yeah.
But then you've got this internal one. And that internal one is like, it's essentially looking for comfort, right? Not saying be lazy, but it's like, I've been doing it this way for a long time. The coach is now telling me to do it this way. Coach is probably telling you this the whole time, by the way. You just weren't hearing it. But the coach is doing it, and it feels awkward. It feels weird. And it's like, yep, it feels awkward and weird, just like it did when you first came in the room and didn't know how to do anything. It's about familiarization with whatever it is that you're doing. And the battle between, do I ignore that external voice and go with the comfort and stay with the safe, stay with the familiar? Or do I respect that coach and do I go to where they're asking me and work there until that becomes the comfort?
Yeah.
And this is where you've got to have your own self-discipline as an athlete, as a student, as a martial artist, or whatever you are. You've got to have that discipline to be able to listen, put your ego aside and do. But if the advice you're given is terrible from a person who's coming from the wrong place for the wrong reasons, like whatever it is, then that's not great. So you've also got to have the right person.
Yeah.
You know, so how do you know you got the right person? That's a tough one. It takes time. You know, you've got to build trust. You've got to take that time. Like
it's that relationship, the connection that you were talking about before as well. They're those important things aside from all the training and that, the human connection, those people that you trust and that you know, regardless of if they may be saying the right thing in the moment, it's what they believe is right, if that makes somewhat sense.
I mean, you know, Neil is one of the coaches at the gym. He's a really good black belt. I mean, pretty much always say the same thing. He's better than me.
Yeah.
Like, he's definitely a better competitor than me, for sure. Very different styles, different type of, you know, operation and stuff. But Neil will always talk about how do you get that competitor's mind to where it needs to be at the time it needs to be there. And to be honest, I get, like I say, I got this kind of like, you know, OCD, autistic kind of thing where I get stuck on mechanics and anatomical things. You've got to be in this position, you've got to do it that way and do it this way. And that's super important. Whereas, I mean, I might be talking out of school and Neil might tell me I'm wrong here, which is fine. But my understanding is that Neil will he believes that too, but he's more likely to say, that doesn't matter if the headspace is wrong.
Yeah.
You've got to get the headspace right.
Yeah.
And he'll be thinking about that sort of thing a lot. And what he will do is spend time with that individual over months, talking to them and, you know, answering their questions and hearing their concerns as well, and back and forth and back and forth. And over time, probably he's building them up.
Yeah.
And building them and helping them to learn to connect to the right headspace, and it becomes a habit. And, you know, like, they're different approaches and different things, but it's where they, you know, ultimately where they need to be.
And what you mentioned there is the psychological aspect to it, I guess, as well. And that's a really interesting one, because you watch, there's a few different ways. One that I like a lot is, it's probably like a guilty pleasure in it. A lot of people don't like him, but the Conor McGregor's psychological aspect to that mental warfare that he would kind of put on an opponent prior to fight. And you saw that it worked.
Oh, totally works.
And it's a complete different kind of realm to it, but I think it adds such importance. And what you were saying before about how Neil kind of uses that and builds up the psychological confidence of his students in a way. What are some experiences of you using that, and how important do you think that it is? I see it as,
Look, it's a really kind of a funny one to me, because, so you pick on a Conor McGregor, right? I mean, there was a time not so long ago when every man and his dog thought he was the coolest guy out, and then it's like suddenly he's not.
Yeah.
Nothing changed to me. Like, you know what Conor McGregor is? He is a guy who put the work in for a long time. Basics, until he got really good. And then he worked out that if he amplifies certain aspects of his personality, it'll pay off, right? I can't really fault it.
No, not at all.
There's probably a lot about his personality that, you know, you could judge, but I mean, he's also not my best friend. So, you know, but I don't really have it. Like, I don't think that the same people who loved him and now they hate him, I think that's a bit, you know, I think they probably loved him too much in the first place, maybe.
Yeah.
But Conor McGregor's an interesting one, because whilst I don't probably advocate doing it the way he did it, I do think there's a lot of strength in doing what he did. So it's funny. It's the opposite of what I would encourage a person to, a good person to do in life, right? So in life, if I want to hold my head high, if I want to have pride in myself and I want to be a good person or achieve great things or whatever it is, right? Firstly, I don't aim to be above you. I may, you know, theoretically be above in some measures, you know, compared to certain people if I do great things. You know, like Einstein's above me in brains, right? But you know what Einstein never did? Einstein never hit the books to be better than others. He hit the books because he wanted to hit the books, right? That's what happened. And there's another version of that which is unhealthy. If Einstein's whole goal and I don't know why I'm using Einstein as an example, but he came to my head. If Einstein's goal was to be smarter than everyone, which it wasn't, it was to advance his science, his knowledge, right? But say it was, he could do it by getting smarter, or he can do it by kind of making everyone else appear to be dumber by having a go at them, picking on them, right? And anyone I meet in any community, any community that I'm involved in, I meet that person who's like dragging other people down to make themselves feel good. Well, first, I don't respect it. I don't like it. And I always put it in my what will I teach my kids filter.
Yeah.
And I'm not teaching my kids that. No way. On the other hand, if I'm Conor McGregor and I want my opponent to be less, right? I want my opponent to be that bit slower, that bit hesitant, that bit unsure of themselves. And I want to walk in that ring not believing I can win, but knowing I can.
Yeah.
Knowing that the fight's already over because that person's tentative and I can hit him first. That's what I want to go in there knowing. So the way he approaches that mentality going in is really effective. If you did it in any realm other than, I don't mean being a fighter, I mean the fight. If you do any other realm, then I wouldn't really love it, but I respect it there. Well, but I teach the same thing in the way, though, some guy tries to shoot a takedown and you stuff that takedown attempt and you come straight back out of it and you basically give them a message that says, is that the best? Because it wasn't good enough.
Yeah.
Your best isn't going to work today. So you throw a kick at me and I check it and it hurts so much. But you don't know that because I'm not going to tell you that it hurt. I'm just going to let you know that it doesn't matter, that it doesn't affect me. Like that's sort of the same thing. I'm lowering your mental energy bar and, whilst keeping mine high. And yours being down keeps mine high.
Yeah, you kind of take from one another and it kind of refuels you. It's like an energy shift or a takeaway from someone else's.
And I mean, the fact that Conor did it before the fights and like I would encourage people to do it in the fight, that doesn't mean it's an inherently different process. That's my understanding. Truth is, if we had Conor in here talking about it, assuming we could get him to make sense, he would probably have a different opinion on that. But
see, I'm Irish. I can understand him.
But like, I do think he has an unshakable sense of self-confidence. I think that's a huge part of it for him.
Yeah.
But not everyone's born with that.
Yeah. I think he was also given a lot of opportunity to utilize that psychological warfare. Like not every fighter is given like a world tour press conference to go and fight Jose Aldo.
And I mean, we know that like the UFC as an organization is, it is far, far from objective. Like we see Dana White like get really reactive and like kick a person off the Ultimate Fighter early on because they drank too much and got into a fight. And then he clicks somewhere a few seasons later that that's actually good for ratings. And so when next people are doing it, he doesn't kick them off, but he kind of makes excuses why, well, they're lucky that such and such didn't see that. They'd be out the door or whatever. Yeah. And it's like, it's clearly, it's transparent. It's totally false. But, that's what the UFC do. They kind of have that WWE model.
Yeah, the theatrics side to it as well as the martial art.
Because they've lent into that so heavily, I don't see that in ONE FC so much. Like they don't tend to lean that way. They tend to be more about this matchup and that matchup.
Yeah.
Personally, I like that better. As far as like role models for the kids, I like that better. But, as long as we understand what the UFC is.
Yeah, that's it.
It's definitely not, objectively speaking, the best fighter versus the best fighter.
No.
I mean, they're all good fighters, but that's not what's doing it. Do you have a are you political or are you do you get
there's
a lot
so
of
many
hits?
layers to it. There really is.
Totally.
And it's unfortunate because I see a lot of good fighters in there, but they may not have that layer of that theatric side to them. So it actually will work as a disadvantage for them kind of going up the scales of it and getting those opportunities given to them. I think, that's a big thing that I've seen, that as much as there can be some great fighters, there's so many other aspects that will give them the opportunity to go for a title shot. Or maybe they'll miss this one fight and then that will jeopardize their entire, like the butterfly effect of the fighting is actually really interesting and something I've gone back through and looked at. Yeah.
Well, I mean, and when you think about what's involved, like in the UFC, like there's a, I don't know, you could probably say it's a metaphor for America, really, but there's a desperation that's built in. Like, how much are people getting paid to show these days? Like, it's not very much money.
No, not at all.
You know, I remember talking to a guy in Sydney who, I don't think he ever made it, but he potentially could have done. He was close. And this was 10 years ago or something. And I remember this guy saying to me, you know, even if I just get one fight, you know, that's my deposit on the house sort of thing. And I was like, I didn't really say much to him because I think he'd been holding that dream for a long time.
Right.
But I mean, in Sydney, you're not going to get a deposit on a house for $8,000.
No.
Especially after you've had a 3-month camp and paid your trainers and paid all your meals and all that sort of stuff. Like, you know, like even just to get your foot in the door, you're already behind, economically speaking, like so far. It's so hard. And I mean, how much money do this many people at the bottom get paid versus that one person at the top? Like it's like I can't remember what the numbers were now, but I think when Mayweather Pacquiao, which was like that biggest boxing match ever before the McGregor fight. Yeah. Right, like that card. Now I'll make the numbers up, completely make them up, right? But let's pretend they're true. Right? Yep. What I read was that say Mayweather put like $350 million for him, and maybe Pacquiao got 100, something like that. And then the guys on the undercard were like getting hundreds of dollars, not even thousands of dollars.
Yeah, right.
And it's like, sure, it's an undercard fight, but same token, it's an undercard fight on the biggest
fight at the moment in the world at that time.
Yeah. I mean, I'm probably not stepping out of school by saying that Mayweather's fairly money focused and fairly, you know, like what did like Pacquiao went and built like 20,000 homes in the Philippines to give away after that or something. He built 20,000 rooms on his home. Like, I mean, I don't know. I don't want to speak too out of turn because I don't know any of that. That's not what I heard. But I think the things like the purses that were paid, that is public knowledge because that's like the Athletics Commission declare that. So that's public. And I'm not even saying like Mayweather should have to do it differently or whatever else. I'm not saying that. Like, it's not my business. I didn't build that show. Yeah. You know, and I don't even know how much he kept out of that money too. Like, I'm sure he had a lot of bills to pay too. But I bet you putting on an international boxing match costs money. But what I'm saying is the bottom rung of the ladder doesn't get much money. You know, so
there's a big gap, definitely.
Yeah,
there's a massive gap. Yeah,
you got to have that. There's got to be like, what's your edge? Because it's not how good a fighter you are.
Yeah,
it's like, you know, are you like really this way or that way on the political spectrum, or are you really funny, or do you take the piss out of your opponent, or do you wear like pink hair like O'Malley does? Right, like you know, like maybe O'Malley really likes wearing pink hair, but. Or maybe he's grown to like it. Yeah. But he didn't used to. So
there's those sides to it as well.
Yeah, which I don't judge any of it. Like, you know, whatever you got to do to make a living.
Exactly, that's it. And I think the cool thing that I did mention to you, I'm pretty sure beforehand, and speaking of like gaps in the fighter pay, is jiu-jitsu competitions. And the one that was on most recently, I don't know if it was that recent now, but the Craig Jones, he did that.
Yeah, it was like a month ago. So.
Yeah. And I think the winners got like $1 million or something. Yeah. Did you see the clip where he rocks up on Joe Rogan's podcast and just tips out all this money? He's another person that has an edge to him as well. He's really funny. I can never tell if he's being serious or not. And he has this kind of...
I don't know Craig that well, but I've met him 2 or 3 times.
Okay,
and as far as I know, the first seminar he ever did was at our gym.
Really?
Yep. And that was when he was a purple belt and he came down here to compete.
No way.
He competed on a cage grappling card down here.
Yep.
And the guy that ran that card, Hamish, he was talking about, who do we know that we can get down here? He said, someone that's good. And I said, oh, this guy from Adelaide, he's good.
Yep.
I'd heard of him. And he's like, yeah, I've heard of him too. Okay. And I said, to be honest, like, he isn't a black belt, so no one really knows him yet.
Yeah.
But he, as a purple belt, had already been on ADCC. Like, not that he fought Homolo and lost, but there's no shame in losing to Homolo when you're a purple belt.
Mm.
What's more important to me is he was there. That's huge, So respect to that. And, he asked me to do a seminar at the gym to try and fund another competition in the States. And I was like, of course you can.
Yeah.
He said, how much of the profits do you want? And I said, I don't want any of it. Go compete, And for me, it's like just another one of those coaches we can have here to share some great knowledge, And I did the seminar with him. It was cool. And so he's a cool guy and he's funny. And I'm not his best friend, so I didn't get to see that side of him. But from what I can tell, the personality we see is his personality.
Yeah.
He's just leaning into it and amplifying it in a really really big way.
So when he came down to the gym, he was a purple belt.
Yeah.
He definitely would be a black belt now. How long ago was that when he came down?
I would have to think about that, but I want to say 2014 or 15.
True. So
like that.
What he's now built now was...
yeah.
Did you see that kind of passion in
I
him?
said to Hamish at the time, I said he will be a world champion.
Yeah.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I am wrong. Isn't that the whole,
we'll find it out. We'll put up a little draw.
I think that's the whole point of being the B team, right? Like a lot of second places.
Yeah.
But you ask the community if he's the people's champion, and they're all going to say
100%.
yes, right?
Yeah.
And it's interesting. The whole thing is fascinating because I'm looking at the whole CGI thing, right? I was looking at that from so many ways, like so many directions. I'm looking at it as a fan. Like, wow, look at those matchups. That's going to be sick, But also, look at those matchups fighting for the biggest prize ever.
Yeah.
That's a totally different story. But then it's like, okay, there's a different format here. 3 rounds, 10-point must system. That's interesting.
And even the little pit that they were in as well.
That's right. That
cool,
too.
Yeah.
Like, there's heaps of little things. And then I'm looking at it from there's a lot of political stuff in the background because it's head-to-head competition at ACC. And, there's clearly biases in one way or another from different people in the community. So there's a lot of different things that were interesting about it to me. But it's interesting because, Craig did that, I believe, with the best of intentions. Like, he's trying to draw attention to the fact that the amount of money in the sport has grown, but the amount of recompense hasn't. And I think that is a very noble and important sort of effort. Yeah. Because like we said with Pacquiao, like we say with the UFC, if there's no incentive to pay people more, and 2, if there's nothing forcing it, there's no competition. Woolworths isn't out there lowering their prices, right? They're putting them up. If you don't have a way of controlling people, they won't be controlled. Yeah. So I think he's doing a good sense in that. But the elephant in the room is there's more money in the sport, therefore there should be higher pay.
Yeah.
There's not enough money, I don't think, in the sport to be paying $1 million to winners of competitions very often.
Well, that was the first time.
Yeah.
It was, yeah.
The whole story, right? The money is all like a donation. And it's from I don't know who donated it. I'm not sure if that's public yet or not.
No, it's not.
I believe it's not, right?
No, he just rocked up on the podcast, had it
Here
on.
it is, right?
Joe Rogan was like, where did you get that from? And he didn't say where, but
that whole thing is like it's from a business perspective, economics perspective, and like it or hate it, that's the world we live in, right? The world, the economy is the world. That's how it is. Even if we didn't call it money, if we called it coconuts, it's still, that's what the world is. It's representation of value. And if you take, I'm not saying the ADCC can't afford to pay people a lot more, because I think they can. I think they can pay a heap more than they do. But saying, look, we did with this money that was given to us is artificial. You know, like if he wasn't given those millions of dollars, he couldn't have given those millions.
Yeah, it wouldn't have happened. Yeah.
So it's a very important tool, like, to make a point. And I hope we have that point made annually so I can watch it.
Yeah.
But I don't. It's not. It's not going to change the landscape in the sense of saying everyone's going to make that kind of money. But let's say it makes ADCC double or triple their prize pool. They probably can afford that, probably without too much trouble. And then suddenly there's more money in it for the athlete, and that's a good thing.
Yeah,
because you know I reckon it still doesn't. It still. Jiu-Jitsu still pays less than MMA, I think, although that's at the low level. It's probably comparable.
Yeah,
now,
very close. Yeah,
but you know, I think it's a good thing. I think he did a good thing.
Yeah,
but I hope it continues. But I hope people keep a perspective of what is sort of really, you know, like what's involved. But you never know. Maybe it encourages other benefactors to put in big numbers.
Yeah.
Because not all the money for prizes has to come from ticket sales. I mean, let's face it, it comes from sponsorship. That's where most money in most of these events comes from. If you get big enough name sponsors, you know. So maybe that's the future.
Yeah. One thing that I was interested on getting your point of view on is what the most valuable lesson MMA and being around this community has taught you.
Wow. Okay. That's a good question. Like, I've been learning heaps of lessons from the community, from the sport, from the whole thing. And so what I'm going to try to do, I'm going to try to find the one that fits most of my life, right?
It's broad. It's broad.
You know, the lesson that helps me be a good teacher, the lesson that helps me run a business well, the lesson that, you know, helps me as a person, as an individual. Like, it's probably a reinforcement rather than a teaching, if that makes sense. Like, you know, like I've always had a pretty strong sort of set of ethics around business. And like the biggest things that I bring to the table when it came to running a martial arts school for a living is I grew up in a family of small businesses.
Yeah.
You know, mechanics, plant nurseries, builders, like a lot of different self-employment, right? And you don't get to run a business and be dishonest or unprofessional for long without everyone knowing it, you know? Like, if you do that in their small community, everyone knows, and you fall over, right? And I don't care what the community is. Like people talk, right? You can't do that sort of thing. And so you've got to keep trying to do the right things. And I think that because the MMA community is so diverse, like you look at all the different gyms in Tassie, for argument's sake, there's a lot of different people from a lot of different backgrounds, and they're doing it for a lot of different reasons, and therefore they're coming at it with all these different ways of being. And there are people in the community who I trust implicitly, and they might not be my best friend, and we may not socialise together, but when it comes to a conversation about what's going on, there's never a question. Like I've never had. A great example is like Legion Fight Sports, right? So Zach will contact me to talk about a matchup or something. There's barely a conversation. Like, I trust him. There are other promoters that I've dealt with around Australia where you know that they're not. There's definitely an ulterior motive. There's definitely something else going on, and so when you start to see those sort of things, it's like, well, am I the guy that everyone else talks about as someone that can be trusted, or the one who can't? You know, like, you've got to really constantly try to be the person that you want to be seen as. And I think that the fight community, like, I think that's a lesson that's true everywhere I've worked in my life, everything I've done. But I think in the fight community, because we're so bombastic and big and open and it all comes down to that fight in the cage and all that kind of thing. I think that it's probably more obvious. And so, you know, I think it's more important that if you want to be a certain way, you've got to be that way. You know, you got to do your best to, you know, be that way. And I reckon that's probably what it is. It's not like, you know, this technique or that, you know, whatever else, because that's all pretty subjective stuff.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
No, that is, I loved what you said about how being the person that you want to be viewed as by other people, like how you want other people to view you being that person, and also just being conscious on how that would be, how someone would see that. I think it gives you can reflect outside of who you are and look, it's a cool kind of way to look at things. I really liked that analogy that you had.
I was talking to a friend in Sydney recently, and they were talking about, I don't remember now. It doesn't matter. But point is, they're talking away, and they said, "Oh, this person I was talking to told me this thing about someone else." You know, like, so I'm talking to this person. And they said, "Oh, guess what? Blah blah blah. You know, got a new job or whatever." And maybe like, "Oh wow, Kieran got a new job. That's fantastic." And I'm telling your friend because I know that you'd be happy for them to know. That's great. But what about if I'm talking away to someone that you maybe you know a bit, maybe you don't know? I say, "Oh, Kieran lost his job." Like that betrayal of trust potentially, right? The problem with that is now the person I'm talking to is saying, "Hang on, this dude's talking about Kieran behind his back. Is he talking about me behind my back?"
Yeah.
You know, like you gotta be careful of that, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know, you've got to be the part that you say that you are. You know, I think that's the key.
Yeah.
That's the really important part.
So
of
you'd say that's the most valuable lesson that.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, reality is, if we're on like a different podcast and I'm a chef and you're asking me about what's the most valuable thing of being a chef, I'd probably say the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, like, I guess one thing I will say is that, you know, a lot of people who run, like, I don't know how many people in Tassie who run gyms do it for a living. Like, I mean, there's definitely some that do, for sure. There's definitely some full-time professional gyms here. But, like, there's a lot that aren't. There's a lot of people who have a job and they do it as a hobby.
Yeah.
Which I mean, that's great. Like, good on you. And I used to do that, you know, but then I decided that I wanted to have a crack at doing it full-time, and that took a lot of work, and I got there. When you're that person, then you have to be that person, you know, which is why I'm not selling a franchised product. I'm not selling, you know, whoever trademarked jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
Like, ultimately, I'm selling Gerry's jiu-jitsu. Yeah. That's ultimately what I'm selling, because I think it's the only way you can kind of do it with integrity, you know. Yeah. So that's probably my view on it, I think. Yeah.
Good. I like the authentic viewpoint, very simple as well. I can imagine you've had quite the journey throughout it all.
Yeah. Look, and I'll be honest too, like, I've had some really, really upsetting times too. Like, when you get something that's important to you, like, that's really important to you, if it gets messed with in some way or another, that can be really emotional, like really hard. And, like, you know, if I've got something important to me and you take it from me, or you break it, or you whatever, then that's hard emotionally. It makes me sad. But what if the thing that you wreck or you break is the thing that is my mental crutch, the thing that keeps me in a good headspace? If you mess with that, then, you know, that's really, really hard. And, you know, like, I'm definitely not the sort of person who likes to air dirty laundry, but I'm not going to go into that sort of stuff. But there have been situations, there have been times, and there have been people where, you know, like, it's made the jiu-jitsu, the Muay Thai, the martial arts communities that I'm in not good. Yeah. You know, like, it's given hard times and sadness. And, you know, that hurts a lot, because it was like, you know, because it's so important to me. Like, me, I was saying this to you the other day actually, but, like, you know, me leaving my kind of public service job where I might have had a really terrible day and I might be feeling crap about it. And then I rush over to the gym to open up to teach some classes, and I take my shoes and socks off and put my feet on the mats. And that feeling, you know, that sense, it's like, wow, this is it. I'm here.
Yep.
That was always like made it better. Problems at home, relationship problems, or different challenges in my life. I'm on the mat. I'm here. But if somehow that mat stops
giving that back,
that's a big thing to take from somebody, you know. So like recognizing that value, and like, you know, like I guess the best way for me to make sure that value is there is to make sure that I bring it.
Yeah.
You know, no good of like blaming someone else for taking it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it definitely does.
Yeah.
I want to wrap it up on a very generic sort of closer. But if you could give any advice to a young person, or even not a young person, any person that is wanting to dive into the world of martial arts, what would it be?
Okay. It's really important that you trust who you're with. So I mean, shopping around is not a bad idea. You know, try a few different places. But, you know, look at the people that are there. Like if you walk in the door of a gym and you look around at everyone that's there, if everyone, like not the coach, but like the people there, if they look like the kind of people you want to be, then it's probably the right place for you.
Yeah.
You obviously get to know the coach. Do you trust them? Are they a good person? But, you know, if you look around and you go, wow, everyone in this room is a carbon copy of each other and they all are differential to this person and they all bow down, well, that's probably a cult. That's probably not where you want to be. Or if you look around and you go, this is a meathead contest, then that's probably, unless you're a meathead then, but if you're not, then that's not where you want to be. But if you look around and go, there's a diverse range of people here and they all seem to respect each other and that person's being helpful to that person, and if that's what you're into, which I am, but if that's what it is, then that's where you need to be. But don't go to a place that has a different kind of ethos than what you're after and like try to force it to fit yourself. Like there's enough people out there, you'll find your home, and you know. But then again, that also comes down to understanding what you're doing there in the first place. Yeah, you know, am I going here because I want to follow in the footsteps of Conor, or am I going there because I'm traumatized because I got assaulted, or am I going there because I want to get fit and meet some people? Like all those, they're all legitimate reasons, but you probably need to understand that about yourself to then know if it's the right place. Yeah. Because that's all that matters, the place. If you rock up to a gym and you train there, you show up twice a week, 3 times a week with regularity, whether you're feeling good or bad, you just rock up and you show up and the team's right, everything else is done. Yeah. Nothing else to worry about. It'll all happen for you. But if you don't have that ingredient, then, well, firstly, you won't show up. You hate it. And secondly, like, you're only going to have 1 or 2 things fall over for you, and that'll be the end of it. Yeah. You know? So I think that's probably the best thing, you know. Find the right environment, find the right community, and embrace it, become part of it, you know. Yeah. So,
and that's even something from someone like myself that is not as active as other people within the gym, your gym, that I definitely do see, and I see that value that you hold there of community and the diversity. Quite a lot. So anyone that is listening and wants to try it, definitely come and give it a crack. It's one of the best things that I've ever done, and we spoke on it just before about getting the feet on the mat and just that groundedness that can bring in quite chaotic times is very powerful. I'm not an expert at all, and I often don't know what I'm doing, but it has brought me a lot of mental clarity throughout some chaotic times. So anyone that is listening, I couldn't recommend then getting on the mat and giving it a go. But thanks so much for coming on and having a chat. I wish we could do it longer, but unfortunately the camera is only filmed for, an hour and 27 minutes, and I'd say we'd be getting very close. But Yeah, no, thanks so much for coming on and having a chat and sharing it. It won't be the last time. But
yeah, it's awesome. Thanks for having me. I love this. I love what you're doing. Like I said at the very start, follow a passion. I don't care what it is. Just follow it. It's awesome.
Perfect. All right. That's episode 7, done and dusted. Sweet.
Thanks, man. That's awesome.